Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Liam's First Look. And today on the show, we're of course talking about UFC St. Louis, and it's going down from St. Louis, Missouri. I'm excited about the card because we've got 13 more fights to break down. And we're coming at you a little bit late in the evening today. I had jiu-jitsu earlier. I had a lot of work to get done in order to, feel prepared to do a show today. So without further ado, let's start as we always do on the first look with our main event of the evening. And if you guys are here for the first time, welcome aboard. Appreciate you being here. Want to just let you guys know off the rip that this is our first look. Tomorrow, I'm going to dive into tape even more before I come back for bets and banter. But today, I do have some of my research done. So without further ado, let's break down the main event. And I think that this is an interesting main event on paper. You got Derrick Lewis, a clear A side here. He's a much more known quantity. He's a much more popular fighter in the main event. He's taking on a much lesser known commodity in Rodrigo Nascimento. And I can tell you guys right off the rip, I have made money on both these fighters. I've made about 10 units of profit betting on these guys' fights over the years. But I've never bet on either one of these guys to win a UFC fight, ironically. When you look, Derrick Lewis is at the, latter portions of his career. He's 39 years of age. His 39th birthday was about 3 months prior to this fight. So when I'm looking, yes, Tristan, I am still going live with Rich in about 12 hours. I'm a soldier, brother. I have no problem going again in a little while, but I'm going to get a small nap in between. My sleep cycle is a little bit different than most people, but I'm going to get a small nap in between. I'm going to watch plenty of footage, plenty of tape to get ready for the show, and I'll be back for bets and banter. But I wanted to get the first look in, so that's what we're doing here. And I know that some people like the solo show, so I wanted to make sure I put that out. So without further ado, we'll continue. And Derrick Lewis, what he brings to the table, obviously, knockout power, devastating. We've seen in as recently as the fight with Marcos Osorio de Lima, he knocked out multiple teeth. He was able to put him away almost instantly in that fight, landed a huge flying knee, cost me some coins because fading Derrick Lewis works out sometimes. It doesn't work out every time, right? I bet Tai Tuivasa at plus money, cashed in that spot. Bet Sergey Pavlovich at plus money, cashed in that spot. But then I tried to bet Marcos Osorio de Lima at minus 113. It closed like minus 225, and he ended up getting smoked instantly. So we know that Derrick Lewis still has that capability, even at this point in his career, to go out there and smoke somebody in the first round. He's knocked out very quality fighters like a Curtis Blades over the years, like an Alexander Volkov over the years. And he's shown that his power, carries late into the fight. So in the third round against Volkov, when he was down on the scorecards, he was still able to take him out. He was still able to knock him out, get a devastating finish, get a highlight reel win later on in that fight. What has impressed me about Derrick Lewis is that late in his career, he's shown a new commitment to health and fitness. He's been showing up running, getting a little bit more prepared for these fights. He went 5 rounds with Jailton Almeida. I never expected, 5 rounds of cardio and grappling, especially from a guy like Derrick Lewis. So I really thought that was an impressive look from him. I thought that was an improvement from what we've seen from him potentially in the past. And he says that he's focused in a new way on his cardio, on his preparation, on getting ready for these fights. And he just signed a new 8-fight deal with the UFC. So I have to imagine this is a spot where, win or lose, he's going to have more fights with the UFC. I don't think he's going to retire here. So I think we're going to get the best effort possible from Derrick. And if that's the case, I do think he's capable of winning this fight. He's still got knockout power in his hands. That being said, he's a little bit limited in his other skills. We saw a couple times he was able to reverse positions against Jailton Almeida, but he was never able to do anything from the top position. He's got lethal ground and pound, but his ground and pound did not translate very well against Jailton because of the jiu-jitsu credentials. And in this matchup, you've got a guy in Rodrigo Nascimento who has way less professional experience, way less UFC experience. He's just 4-1 in the promotion. This will be his first main event compared to a prolific main eventer like Derrick Lewis. And his 3-fight winning streak coming into this bout is pretty questionable. He beat Don'Tale Mayes, which is an okay win. He beat Ilir Latifi via split decision, and Tanner Boser, who ended up fighting in the light heavyweight division and being cut from the organization. Again, another split decision win. So the guy has not been very emphatic with his wins in recent years. And he was able to beat Alain Badeau, I believe, via standing TKO in the second round. That was overturned to a no contest. I think he tested positive in that fight. I had as a plus 220 underdog, Chris Daukaus, to knock him out in the very first round. I just took him on the money line there at plus 220, but he ended up knocking him out in the first round very quickly, very easily. So I think you could write a little bit of that off as, he's still being young in his UFC career, still being pretty inexperienced. But Daukaus has quick hands, but he was not the most successful heavyweight overall. He ended up leaving the division shortly thereafter. So I thought that was an interesting note that a guy that got cleaned up very easily by Derrick Lewis was able to clean up Rodrigo Nascimento. You don't want to do MMA math and oversimplify, but it does tell you that maybe there's a class difference on the feet. So Nascimento is probably going to have to pursue takedowns, get on top. He has rear naked choked one opponent, Don'Tale Mayes, in the UFC. So 2 wins over Don'Tale Mayes, in his 4 UFC victories. That's kind of funny that they've matched him that way twice. Let's go refer to our friends at Fight Numbers. They've got the odds board up. And for this fight, we're looking at a plus 145, best available number on Rodrigo Nascimento over at Bet Online. And we're looking at Derrick Lewis, on the other hand, minus 153 at Circus Sportsbook, best available for Derrick Lewis. So do I want to go lay, a 60+% indication on a 39-year-old heavyweight? Not really. Derrick Lewis, he could give a great shot. He could knock somebody out, but he does not take a great shot. I think he's a much higher quality striker than Nascimento. I think he should win this fight. I think 60% is probably accurate, but I don't know that I'm getting great value on the number at that point. His knockout line is very similar. It's like minus 130. Pretty much across the board. So you're looking at a guy in Derrick Lewis who's being priced for his knockout equity, and he's got a lot of knockout equity against Nascimento. I do think Nascimento is kind of fraudulent, but on the other side, Nascimento more likely to mix in the wrestling and the grappling, much younger guy, way less miles on his tires. So I feel like he could go out here and make this a run. He is an American top team product. I think he's tested positive in the past, if my memory serves. So he's got a lot of things that could give you some reason to get behind him. But I do think we got to see it to believe it with a guy like Nascimento, because he's never been in a stage like this. Obviously, it's still the UFC, going to St. Louis, putting on a show in front of fans. And Derrick Lewis has been there a million times. He's going to be the crowd favorite guy, I have to imagine, the guy that's going to be getting the local support in St. Louis. And I think he's going to go out there and really try and put on a show. So Derrick Lewis via knockout is the prediction, is the pick for me. But I do think there's some downside risk that Nascimento could just be the fresher guy, the younger guy, go out there, push the pace, take him to the ground. We're seeing a shrinking Derrick Lewis over time. We did see him come in the past, 265 pounds, cutting weight to make the limit at heavyweight. And now we haven't been seeing that from Derrick as often. We've been seeing him coming in a little bit more slim, a little bit more trim, a little bit more ready to go. And that does help with the cardio, but that also could make him a little bit easier to pick up, throw around. He always used to say, I'm the toughest blue belt in Texas. But you've got a guy like Nascimento who is going to go out there and look to press the wrestling and the grappling. If we refer to his topology, he's got 6 wins as a professional via submission, just 2 via knockout, and he's 2-1 career to the knockout. His only UFC loss is via knockout. Derrick Lewis, as we know, is the UFC heavyweight knockout king, 22 wins via knockout overall as a professional, 18 of those coming in the UFC. So we've seen a lot of great results from Derrick Lewis. We've seen him come through in these main event spots before, but recently, the main events have not been going his way. Jailton Almeida beat him in a main event. Sergey Spivak beat him in a main event. Sergey Pavlovich was not a main event spot. I think the Daukaus fight was his last main event win. So, hey, maybe he can get back on track here with another guy who fell victim to Chris Daukaus in Nascimento. But you're going to have to pay some chalk in this heavyweight division to find out. But I think that Derrick Lewis probably does get the job done here. So give me the Black Beast as my pick. Give me him to get it done by knockout as the official prediction. But I'm going to do a little bit more tape and due diligence on this fight and make sure that all the ducks are in a row. But I just don't really see much from Nascimento. Shout out to Mason here. Says fight not to go the distance, literally minus 1,000. Welcome to the heavyweight division. Derrick Lewis does not love to see those full 25 minutes, and Jailton Almeida, one of the only guys that can force that out of him. Shout out to Josh Frick, says late night Liam. I've been waiting all week. Cheers to you, my brother. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you making the time. And let's move along to this co-main event of the evening, where we've got Joaquin Buckley taking on Nursulton Ruziboev, hometown guy in Joaquin Buckley. And both these guys are making a quick turnaround off that last event. I think they both fought in Atlantic City. So swig of the coffee. And it's on to this co-main event. Now let's first start with the Joaquin Buckley side as I kick off my slides and we free the feet for the rest of the show. But in any case, we've got Joaquin Buckley, and he's been looking good lately. He moved down to this welterweight division, new Mansa, Joaquin Buckley, again, from St. Louis, Missouri. So he's got the hometown fight. He's got all the motivation in the world. Plus he's on a win streak. He's got momentum. But let's look at the win streak and put it in context. He beat Vicente Luque, a guy who's looked a little bit like a shell of himself. I thought Luque would win that fight, truth be told, but Luque really just did not look like he had the wherewithal, the ability to take damage, the durability, and instead he got cracked in that fight. And he looked like he wanted out there. He looked like he was ready to quit, looked like he was ready to give up, with all due respect to the legend. So I think that that's just the way it was. I think Joaquin Buckley got him at the right time, right place, and picked his shot, went to his hometown, got the win. Now he's got to get the pressure of bringing it back to his hometown. And he beat Alex Morono, a guy who's not very athletically gifted, who just struggled to go, 15 hard minutes with Court McGee and get the win. Andre Fialho, a guy who struggled to not get finished in his UFC fights. And, to win his UFC fights, he really had a hard time. He got cut from the promotion. So he really hasn't been beating the highest quality fighters. I think Luque is the best fighter that he's beaten in this recent run. But again, Luque he beat at the right time. Chris Curtis knocked him out pretty brutally. And Chris Curtis is a guy who definitely has power in his hands. He almost knocked out Brendan Allen once again, but that's the only guy he's knocked out recently. Marc-Andre Barria went to a decision with him. Brendan Allen survived to the bell. Kelvin Gastelum went to decision with him. Nasruddin Imavov, they clashed heads. Curtis took the worst of it. So Buckley's the only guy he's knocked out since Brendan Allen, again, back in 2021. So really, I think that that's a little bit of a concerning look for Buckley. Also, we go back and look at Buckley's record. He was able to beat Duraev. Duraev's turned out to be a fraud a little bit in the UFC, especially lately. Just has not looked like the guy that we used to see on tape, and his chin has not been holding up. Abdul Razak Al Hassan, guy who struggled to get wins in the promotion, and he had to wrestle him in that spot. They still have beef with one another. Antonio Arroyo, a guy who I think has flamed out of the UFC, if my memory serves. And then Alessio Di Chirico, head kick, knockout loss, brutal spot. Kevin Holland was able to beat him up really bad, talk to him the whole time, let him have it. Logan Storley beat him via unanimous decision. Nothing wrong with that. Jackie Ghosh knocked him out in the first round. So he's kind of struggled a little bit with these knockout losses over the course of his career, not always against the guys you'd expect. And some of the wins have aged great, like Impa Kasanganay, but some of the wins have aged not very good, like Jordan Wright, Antonio Arroyo, Duraev, not great, Fialho, not great. So I think that it's kind of hit and miss with Buckley. He's clearly a very talented fighter, but he's taking on a guy with a lot more professional experience here, 34, 8-2, but not as much UFC experience. So that kind of balances out for me in terms of the quality of competition, the level of experience. Both these guys can make different claims. Now, Nursulton is coming down from 185 pounds. And for me, that's a little bit of a red flag, just because he can obviously compete at 185. So why would he go down to 170 to take on a guy like Buckley? I mean, I guess because he wants to get back in there, stay active, and get the big name that is Buckley. Obviously, Buckley's got a lot of traction. He's got a lot of online hype. But when I think about all the fights that Nursulton could take, a guy with no neck who doesn't seem like an easy guy to submit and out-grapple. If you just look at Buckley's professional career, he's had 24 professional fights, and he's never been submitted. He's never registered a submission either. I think that does kind of speak volumes to the fact that Buckley, he's got a build that's kind of difficult to submit. Big arms, strong guy, elbows are kind of in tight. And then when you're looking at his neck, he doesn't have much of a neck. He's kind of got that big brolic shoulders, the build, with that backpack kind of build. So I'm looking at a guy like Buckley and saying to myself, all right, it's probably not going to be easy to submit him, right? To just use your submission grappling, but maybe you could take him to the ground and beat him up and use your vicious ground and pound. We do know that Nursulton Ruziboev has very good ground and pound. His stand-up has looked sensational in the UFC, but we've only seen 2 fights, and we haven't seen more than a round out of this guy in the UFC. So Nursulton, I've been arguing, people called him a fraud. People said he sucks. People said that he's no good. And I was able to get plus 190 against Bruno Ferreira, and I was very happy about that bet because you got the bigger guy, the longer guy, volatile middleweight fight, and he went out there and cracked him. But now I think that you've got a very competitive fight here and a very competitive line. So for me, that's about accurate. I would probably lean towards, if this goes to the scorecards, it's going to go to Buckley because he's the hometown guy, because he's the local fighter. I think the guy who's more likely to finish this fight in the first round is Nursulton Ruziboev. But I think as the fight gets extended, you could see Buckley having a little bit more success, especially if he's able to defend takedowns and keep it upright. I think that Duraev expected to get takedowns on Buckley, and as he started to get them defended, that's when the fight got a little bit more complicated, a little bit more interesting. And I think that for Ruziboev, he's got a big, long body. Last time out, he had Dumas in front of him, who was kind of looking to trade and be long and match him at distance. And Buckley's trying to rip, get inside, get to the body, get upstairs with those short hooks, and throw with a lot of power and intensity, and just be an ornery prick in there. And he can also mix in those crazy spinning kicks like we saw against Impa Kasanganay. He's an extreme athlete. So I think that this is not an easy fight to call. I think it's a volatile fight, but I do think in St. Louis, it's hard to fade Buckley, who's been on a run and who does seem like a very marketable guy. But he does have a lot of knockout losses. He has been on a great run. And I do think there's a lot of public sentiment behind him. And Ruziboev, he's done nothing, to look like a flake so far in the UFC. He's looked like a beast. He beat the shit out of Dumas. He beat the piss out of Bruno Ferreira as well. And so did we learn a ton about him? No, but he hasn't looked like a fraud either. So to get plus money on him, to find out if he can go out there and manage a task like this, I think it's an interesting question because he could go out there and get his third first-round knockout in the UFC in a row, and I don't think we can count out that possibility. But the longer the fight goes, we're going to get more questions answered about Ruziboev. So for me, fun fight, good matchmaking, good scrap, but I want to see the weigh-in before I make any action on this fight because I don't know if Ruziboev's going to make 170. I don't know if he's going to look good. And I do think he's going to be huge compared to Buckley. But if he sacrifices too much in terms of the cardio, in terms of the durability because of that weight cut, it's not going to pay dividends. So it's a wait and see situation for me in terms of the weight cut for this one. But I'm going to also watch a little bit more tape, see what I can gather. But Buckley, good record in the UFC. I think 8-4 in the promotion. And that seems pretty solid to me. For a guy, local hometown fighter, been doing very well in the weight class, good, solid UFC record, a lot of experience. I don't want to rule that guy out. Fun fight. So no betting action for me here and no strong lean, honestly, about who's going to win. I think it's pretty quality. Shout out to my guy, Mason, in the chat. Says the last time Ruzi went to decision was 2019. He has won all fights by finish after that. So great call. Great shout. And shout out once again to our friends over at Fight Numbers. You can use my promo code Liam over at Fight Numbers. They'll hook you up. All the information you need is in the description below, but I'm referring to their odds screen right now. And on this fight, we've got Joaquin Buckley minus 129 over at Bet Online. Significant movement on this fight. Nursulton Ruziboev plus 125. Plus 125, over at Bet365. So there you have it. If you're looking to get involved in the fight, best numbers available, very similar distribution in terms of that synthetic hold. It's a small synthetic hold between Bet Online and Bet365, two sharp markets out there, making MMA lines. So hold on just 1 second. I'm going to take off my sweatshirt because I am way too warm here, and we're repping Brian Battle underneath. Bang, we're back and we're ready to go. So next up, guys, we've got a 205-pound bout. We've got the light heavyweight swinging at 205 pounds, Alonzo Menifield, atomic Alonzo Menifield, taking on Black Jag, Carlos Ulberg. this is a interesting spot because Alonzo Menifield is a more experienced guy in the UFC by a pretty substantial margin. He's 8-3 in the promotion, and he's got a tough opponent in front of him in Ulberg. Ulberg's clearly a talented kickboxer, and he's gone out there and he's landed some big shots. He went out there and showed that he's got a ground game as well in the Jun Young Park fight. Or excuse me, not Jun Young Park. Who am I talking about? Got to look at the record. Excuse me, guys. It's 3:30 in the morning. Da Eun Jung, not Jun Young Park. Da Eun Jung. Excuse me. I believe they're teammates. But in any case, he did show that impressive rear naked choke finish late in the fight last time out. So he showed that ground game is coming along. However, that was mostly due to fatigue, due to exhaustion. I don't think that his jiu-jitsu is legendary by any means. I just think he's athletic. I think he could push later on into some of these fights, especially when he's got his opponent eating a lot of damage, wearing it in the fight. And we saw that with Da Eun Jung. He looked like he had been beaten up pretty badly, was wearing it, was tired late in the fight, and then he got submitted. Ihor Potieria got clipped early in the fight. We've seen that's been his downfall in the UFC. Michel Pereira was able to do the same thing to him. Unfortunately, I thought he was going to put up a much better fight there. I still think if it was a longer fight, he puts up a good fight there, but unfortunately it ended too quickly. We did not get to see it play out. And shout out to Michel Pereira for the violence. But in any case, you look back to the Nikolai Negumereanu fight, another fight with a guy who's very hittable, was able to take him out in the first round. Tafon Nchukwi, guy who is not very good. Fabio Charant, a guy who's also not very good, was able to slow it down, manage to pace there. Two guys that are kind of coming along in their skills, but really have a lot more to prove. I think Fabio may have been cut from the UFC as well. But Kennedy Nzechukwu, who fumbled against OSP in his last fight, was able to take him out in his UFC debut, I believe that was. And that was a spot where, Kennedy clearly just weathered a storm. He's a teammate of Alonzo, I believe, or a former teammate, but weathered a storm and was able to take him out in round 2 after he was exhausted. Shout out to Just Win Baby, says Liam's late look. Love you. Absolutely. Late night first look, but we're still here rocking and trying to get it done. So this is a spot where, I think Carlos Ulberg at 5-1 in the UFC, he's a talented guy. He can go out there and get wins over, other fighters, but he is still growing and developing. He still does not have a ton of professional experience overall. 10 fights as a pro under his belt. Alonzo Menifield has had more fights in the UFC than he has had as a professional. So he's 15-3 as a pro, 8-3 in the UFC. So the losses that he's had, William Knight, OSP, and Devin Clark. And the Devin Clark loss, I think has aged really poorly. The William Knight loss has also aged poorly. He just did not do anything in that William Knight fight, kind of just got cage pushed. The duration there, OSP, that was another fight where I actually bet OSP. I believe OSP was a pretty, significant dog. And I just thought that OSP was the more talented striker, was the more technical striker, and he was able to take him out, knock him out in that fight. But now you look at the Fabio Charant win for him. He was able to finish Fabio Charant where it took, 15 minutes from Carlos Ulberg fighting at a very tepid pace and being very conservative to win that fight against Fabio. He beat Ed Herman via decision. Not a great look, but okay, we'll take it. Then he takes out Oscar Mozarov, the fraud. He beats Misha Serkinov via first-round knockout, which he should have done. Jimmy Crute, he went to a majority draw there. He kind of let that fight slip through his fingers, which is a little bit frustrating. Then he goes out there and finishes Jimmy Crute in the rematch. That was an impressive win, and it was honestly the showing that we should have seen from him the first time. Then he beats Dustin Jacoby via very close decision. Now he's once again installed as the underdog, and he's been producing in this underdog category. A lot of people are not expecting much from him here. He is 36 years of age, but he's going to match some of the reach on the Ulberg side of things, and he swings big, heavy hooks that can take people out. Ulberg kind of swings hooks as well. So I think both these guys could land serious shots and do damage on each other, and I think that Menifield has maybe a little bit more takedown upside in this fight. So probably lean towards the Menifield side for me, but he also could get clipped and knocked out. I don't really believe in Menifield in terms of his brain thinking. So I'd want to get like over 2-1, I think, on the money line. But I think that Alonzo's live in this spot. Let's go over and look at the fight numbers odds here and see what they have on the board. So shout out to our friends over at Fight Numbers. The odds board right now is showing plus 230 on Superbook Sports, the best available price on Underdog, Alonzo, Atomic, Menifield, Carlos Ulberg, meanwhile, at minus 250 at Bet365, best available price. So you're looking at Pretty Boy Ulberg, the City Kickboxing product, the dangerous guy, Black Jag, fun fighter, kickboxing guy against Menifield, the heavy-handed guy, the savvy veteran now at this point in his UFC career, 36 years of age, but still packs a ton of power, and 8-3 in the UFC. Hard to deny that kind of record, that kind of resume. He's been doing a lot better in his recent fights as well, about getting off with a little bit more activity. He doesn't throw that much, but when he does throw, he makes it count. He lands with big impact. And the shots matter. That's why he's winning decisions, even though he's getting outlanded on the numbers. And I think that this is a guy that could go out there and take down Ulberg, could go out there and submit Ulberg potentially. I think Ulberg is not out of the realm to submit him, just because I think he can make some negative IQ decisions. So yeah, for me, it's a really volatile fight. And I think somebody's more than likely going to get finished here in this light heavyweight division. But if it ends up being a cage pushing, disgusting affair, I almost lean more towards Menifield being the value side at the plus money. But Ulberg could just hit him with one big shot and take him out. He is powerful. He does have a great left hook, and we did see OSP take him out with that shot back in the day. So let's see if Alonzo Menifield has learned anything from that performance. But at that point, he was a big favorite, and now he's the big underdog. So, times have changed. All right, guys. Next up, we've got Carlos Diego Ferreira, CDF, taking on Mateusz Rebecki. And there are some people in the comment section and on Twitter that would argue I am Mateusz Rebecki. So shout out to them. I am certainly not. I can tell you guys I'll not be stepping in the octagon on Saturday night. So don't give me the credit. Don't give me the blame. He is 9-1 as a professional to the knockout, and he has never been submitted. 7-0 career to the sub, 3-0 career to the decision. Very impressive record at 19-1. Beat Roosevelt Roberts, first round sub, beat Loic Rodziboev, overhand left knockout, and he had shut down his leg completely with the low kicks at that point. So kind of slowed him down, stopped the movement, and then beat him up, finished him. And what's so interesting is Nick Fiore, he's maybe the toughest guy in the UFC, and I'm half kidding about that, right? But if you go back and look at Nick Fiore's resume, he's 7-2 in the UFC, and he got cut from the promotion, got sent back. But Chase Hooper beat the absolute piss out of Nick Fiore, and he was not able to finish him. If you guys go back and rewatch that fight, there were several times it looked like the referee almost stopped it on the feet standing, with Chase Hooper landing, 4, 5, 6 punch combinations, bop, 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 just throwing, landed. And Fiore just does not go down, holds his hands up high, keeps staying in there, and keeps taking the ass whooping. And we saw that Mateusz Rebecki in his UFC debut struggled with Fiore because Fiore is a tough guy. He can go in all positions. He's well-rounded, but he's a jack of all trades, master of nothing. So he doesn't have great offense. He doesn't really have a phase of the fight where he's trying to put it. Right now, he's still getting better. He's still learning and growing. But what we saw from him in that fight is that he's just a tough guy to look good against. You kind of see he can go out there and even if you can get off on good offense, he's just tough to put away. He's a really difficult guy, to dissuade. He got knocked out via slam in 2016 in the amateur. Since then, he's never been finished in a fight. New England Cartel, that those guys are built tough. Calvin Cater, Rob Font, guys that you could beat the tar out of sometimes, but you really just can't put them away at a high clip. So shout out to Mateusz Rebecki, who was able to fight through that. He suffered, a little bit of exhaustion, a little bit of cardio fatigue, but was still able to push through and find the win, get a W by any means necessary in that UFC debut as a big favorite. Rodrigo Ligio has been, 2-1 since the Contender Series, but he got submitted in the first round. I actually bet Mateusz Rebecki by submission in that spot. So I've liked Rebecki since he got to the UFC. I thought that was a great spot to fade a Brazilian with a guy that people maybe didn't know Rebecki for his grappling. Now he's only plus 5XX to submit CDF, Carlos Diego Ferreira, very talented grappler, very high-level submission threat. And you look at Carlos Diego Ferreira, the problem is he's an old fighter. He's a guy that's coming in here, and unless he's coming in jacked up off insane PEDs, and he's going to piss uranium, and he's going to be showing some nuclear yellow out there. I think he's going to be in hard times here. And Rebecki is a tough guy. He's a powerful guy. He's got power in his hands. He's got an ability to wrestle and grapple as well. And we saw against Michael Johnson. It's funny. I'll tell you guys a quick, brief personal anecdote. My buddy says to me, he's not a sharp better. He's not a guy that spends a lot of time on this. He's just a guy that's a really good guy, and he does jiu-jitsu, knows combat sports well enough. And he said to me, you know what, man, I like Michael Johnson in this next fight. He's taking on Carlos Ferreira. We're watching together. And he's like, man, can you go ahead and just throw this money on it? And I'm like, bro, I don't want to do that. I was like, I know that it looks on paper like Michael Johnson should win this fight. I was like, I get it. He should win this fight. I was like, but the thing is, Carlos Diego Ferreira, he's got some power. He's got some submissions. And Michael Johnson just has a way of fumbling fights. And he's like, dude, it's my money. Who cares? Just go ahead and throw like $20, $40, whatever it was. Just throw it on him. And I'm like, dude, all right. Like, I get it. I know that you want me to do it. Like, all right. And I take the money, I put it in my pocket, and I just tell him, I'm like, listen, buddy, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to pay you. If I'm wrong, I was like, I'm going to pay you the money because I can't in good conscience bet on Michael Johnson right now. And I just can't do it. And so I was like, you know what, take the money back. I'm not going to bet it. And just in good conscience, I'll pay you if I'm wrong. And if you guys have not seen that fight, I encourage you guys to go back and watch that fight before you hear the conclusion of this story. But in any case, the way that the story ends, spoiler alert, is that, of course, when you look back at the fight, Michael Johnson winning the fight, cruising in the fight, looking great. Michael Johnson stuff, pop, pop, looking good, moving the head, banging, hitting shots, doing well, defending takedowns, looking great, right? And my buddy looks over to me and he goes, dude, what the hell did I tell you? He's like, I told you to bet on Michael Johnson. I thought I told you that Michael Johnson was going to win this damn fight. I thought I said Michael Johnson's going to be clowning on him, going to look faster, going to look all this stuff. And if you guys haven't seen it, Michael Johnson then gets decked with one punch and just absolutely lays out on the ground, crucified, unfortunately. It was a brutal, brutal knockout from Carlos Diego Ferreira. So all you can do is take your hat off to him. But Michael Johnson, unfortunately, has made a career of doing that, guys. Winning the fight right up until he loses the fight, going out there looking good, putting on a nice show. My friend was very happy to keep that money, I'll tell you. And when you look back, there's a guy in CDF who is very talented, who's fought a very high quality of opponents over the years. But Mateusz Gamrot, people have the wrong impression of this fight as far as I'm concerned, okay? Maybe my biases are colored by the fact that I bet Gamrot, and then I bet Gamrot to win via submission in round 2. Guys, if you look at that fight, Mateusz Gamrot throws a knee to the body, bang, hits him with a big knee to the body, and he gets a reaction from Carlos Diego Ferreira. And Ferreira is like, oh, and starts to like lean over to check on his rib, which has been cracked, right? And then all of a sudden, he reaches around and starts fishing for that rear naked choke grip. And as soon as he locks in the rear naked choke grip, Carlos Diego Ferreira looks at the referee and goes, my rib. And they stopped the fight, call it a TKO. They did not pay me out on that sub bet. So when I tell you this game will give you the highest highs and the lowest lows, I thought that that was kind of the expose of how you can submit a guy like Carlos Diego Ferreira. There's so many of these guys that their skills are so high level on the ground. You're not submitting them unless you get them hurt physically or you get them exhausted, completely fatigued. And I think that for Mateusz Rebecki, his path to winning this fight and looking dominant, paying off his line, is landing the bigger shots on Carlos Diego Ferreira, making him miss, landing big inside low kicks, outside low kicks, hitting him with shots that make him, stationary target, cutting better angles than him, moving around him. And then when he gets tired, when he gets fatigued, when he's starting to, red line and flag a little bit, like I thought he was in between rounds against Michael Johnson, then what you could see from a guy like Rebecki is then take him down when he's already fatigued, when you guys are already both sweaty, when there's nothing easy he could latch onto. And we have seen guys, like a Gregor Gillespie go out there and not submit him, right? But basically beat him up and ground and pounded him with strikes in the second round and just used his pressure, his aggression, wore down his tank. And there was nothing technical about it, right? Technique for technique. Who's the better jiu-jitsu player? Carlos Diego Ferreira. But if you make it about technique, you'll lose in that situation. And Gregor Gillespie made it about heart, toughness, balls, and who could push further, faster, right here, right now, at balls to the wall speed. And I think that we've seen Carlos Diego Ferreira struggle with that in numbers of fights. The Beneil Dariush fight, why did he lose that fight? He got out-wrestled. He got out-grappled. Why did he lose to Dustin Poirier? He got clipped on the chin. He got knocked out. He won a bunch of fights in between, but most of those guys, unfortunately, are no longer with the promotion or they're no longer having success. And then, like I said, the tough fights he's had recently, he's lost most of them. The Michael Johnson fight, he lost every minute of it until he won, essentially. And he's had a ton of canceled bouts. Shakar Close, he pulled out of that bout due to injury. Grant Dawson, he pulled out of that bout, due to injury. Drew Dober, he pulled out of that bout due to injury. So this guy has just been dealing with a lot outside the cage. And I think that when you look at, his trajectory over time, I just think he's trending in the wrong direction. I do think it's probably too wide from a money line perspective. He's 9-5 with the promotion. So obviously he's a very tough guy and he could go out there and make this an honest fight. Maybe he doesn't get finished in this spot, but I think Rebecki is just going to have too much for him. I think he's going to be, quality in every position. And I think he's going to win the fight. So for me, Rebecki is the pick. I do think that the money line side is probably a dog or pass situation on the savvy, proven veteran, but you have more professional wins on Rebecki in less professional fights, and he hasn't been fighting at this UFC level the whole time, but he does seem like he's poised to make a deeper run right now in the division as it currently stands, and I think Rebecki is on the way up. I think he's on the up and up. I think he's a true prospect, so for me, I think he's going to get the win here. Next up, guys, we've got another St. Louis fighter, Sean Woodson, taking on Bruce Leroy Caceres in the featherweight division. This is a fun one because Sean Woodson, the sniper out of St. Louis, is 31 years of age, and he has 78-inch reach, 6'2" in the division, huge featherweight, and he's taking on Alex Caceres, who's normally a pretty big featherweight in his own right, but he's going to be the substantially smaller guy, 5'10" for Alex Caceres, 73.5-inch reach, so he's given up 4.5 inches of reach. He's given up 4 inches of height. He's going to be 4 years older as well, 35 compared to just 31 for Woodson. So I think Woodson's checking a lot of boxes here, from a anthropomorphic advantage standpoint. When you're looking at the odds, unfortunately, he's installed here at a -195 favorite, best available over at Superbook Sports. Of course, we're quoting from our friends over at Fight Numbers, their odds board. And now I'm looking at a +185 as the best available price on Bet Online for the Alex Caceres side. So a lot of market volatility here. And I can understand why. Alex Caceres, proven vet, a guy who's got a lot of time in the organization, a lot of proven results as well in the organization, 16-12 in the UFC. Very good record, very quality. Lost to Giga Chikadze, ranked fighter last time out. Beat Daniel Pineda the time before that. Impressive win. Beat Julian Erosa via head kick knockout. Impressive win. Lost to Sadiq Youssef, a guy who was just a ranked fighter before he got finished at UFC 300. Unfortunately for him. Beat Sung Woo Choi, a guy who's hung out on the fringes of the top 25 in the UFC's featherweight division. Beat Kevin Kroom, a guy who had no business in the featherweight division. Beat Austin Springer via first-round submission, the guy that beat Giga Chikadze on Contender Series, I believe. Beat Chase Hooper back in the day as well. So he's got a very solid record, and he lost to Kron Gracie via rear naked choke back in 2019. That's the last time he gave up a finish loss in the UFC. So he's a guy that's been very difficult to finish. You look at the guys that have finished him throughout the years. Jason Knight got him with a rear naked choke. That was all the way back in 2017. Uriah Faber got him with a rear naked choke. That was all the way back in 2014. So he's had a ton of longevity with the promotion. And you look back, he got finished against Jimmy Hennis all the way back in 2011. So holy shit. Shout out to Alex Caceres. He spent a lifetime doing this stuff. Before I even watched MMA, this guy was involved heavily with the promotion, and he lost to Michael Johnson in the Ultimate Fighter finale, it would appear, back in 2010. So, man, just nothing but respect for Caceres and the longevity he's been able to produce. However, he is coming into this bout, on a pretty up and down recent run of performances, 3 wins in his last 5 fights. And for Sean Woodson on the other side, he's got 4 wins and a draw in his last 5 fights. Beat Yusuf Zalal, a win that's aged quite well based on how Yusuf Zalal just burst back in the division, right? Cashed a nice underdog ticket for us as well. Colin Anglin, guy who had no business in the UFC, and he treated him accordingly. He sent him packing, knocked him out, finished him in that fight. Luis Saldana, weird split draw. It was a crazy fight. But hats off to Sean Woodson for surviving adversity and finding a way to the bell in that fight. Beat Dennis Bazooka, a win that doesn't really tell me much. Beat Charles Jourdain in an impressive fashion. Despite the fact that it was a split decision, he deserved the win there. He earned the win there, and I believe that was in Canada. So had to go there and do it on foreign soil against a hometown fighter. Now he's doing it at home. And I think if this fight goes to the cards, he might get the lean based on that hometown dynamic. And on top of that, you look at a guy like Sean Woodson, he's been showing improvements in the wrestling and the grappling in his recent fights. I think that's his biggest liability in the past, that and his cardio. I also believe that he's going to have, the more effective striking in this fight. At range, I do think he could get clipped on the chin. It's 245-pound guys throwing, kicks and punches at each other's head, neck, and chest. Somebody could go down here. But I have a feeling that Sean Woodson is going to get the job done at home here. And I think he could produce a finish. It's been a while since you've seen Caceres finish, but the limb length is there for a guy like Woodson to create some volatility. And then on top of that, he does have some moderate power in his strikes. He does throw a lot of volume. He does connect a lot. And Caceres has done a great job of not getting knocked out in his fights, but he has been hurt a little bit. He has been wobbled at times. He's been around for a long time. And that kind of bill from all that damage from all those UFC fights could always come due. He is a little bit older, like I mentioned, 35, creeping up there in terms of age. So it could go either way, but I'm leaning towards Woodson to get the job done here. He's my pick. And I don't know exactly how he's going to get it done, but I think late rounds or via decision, he's going to get the nod here one way or the other, I feel. Shout out to the chat, sharpest chat in the game. Aussie Fight Fan says, Liam, let's get it this weekend. Absolutely, my brother. Mason says, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Absolutely. So shout out. We got a lot of sharp people in here. Alex Ramirez and all the Dome. Shout out to you guys. Shout out to Tristan as well. Crazy. There's 2 6'5" welterweights on the same card. A lot of weird dynamics like that. The matchmakers love to see stuff like that too. Matching up crazy size differences and stuff. So let's talk about the rest of them, man. We got another fun fight up next in the main card. To round us out, we got Waldo Cortes-Acosta taking on Robelis Despaigne, and everybody loves to talk about this fight. Robelis Despaigne, biggie boy. No, I'm kidding. He is not biggie boy. He's the big boy, and he's 5-0 so far in his professional career, been on a great run. But now the rubber's going to meet the road a little bit, right? Waldo Cortes-Acosta has double the professional experience. He has double or quadruple the UFC experience, right? 4-1 in the promotion. His only loss was to Marcos Rogerio de Lima via close decision. And Marcos Rogerio de Lima was actually out wrestling him over the course of that fight, was also using leg kicks to exploit the stationary boxing target that is Waldo Cortes-Acosta at times in his fights. Waldo has shown that against wrestlers, against guys like that, he's not an easy mark. He doesn't just get finished right away when the fight goes to the ground. We saw him fight Thomas Peterson, another guy who made it to the UFC via Contender Series on the regional scene back in LFA, and they had a close competitive fight, but he was able to outlast him, defend the takedowns in round 3, get the finish, get the win. And we saw against Marcos Rogerio de Lima, despite the fact he lost, it was still a competitive fight. He beat Rebecki. That was an impressive first-round knockout win, but otherwise went to decision with Andrei Arlovski. It was fine that he got the decision win there against the notorious, hard-to-beat on the cards, Andrei Arlovski, but he didn't look very impressive. I think most people would agree in that fight. a little bit boring, a little bit point fighty, a little bit tepid. Then the Chase Sherman, the Jared Vanderaa wins. They fit the same bill. Beat Suzart via first-round KO on Contender Series, like I mentioned. The third-round stoppage of Thomas Peterson. Beat Derrick Weaver in the LFA via finish as well. So he's shown an ability to finish at times. He just has been very spotty and inconsistent with it. It just gets interesting because he beat 10-5 Edison Lopez back in 2021 via Kimura in the very first round. And we know that Robelis Despaigne is a primary stand-up fighter. He comes from an Olympic background, I believe, in Taekwondo. And I've watched some of his matches, right? And a lot of it's pretty slow paced, constant resets by the referee. It's not a lot of clinching and grappling. I do think that Waldo is in for a rude awakening potentially if a fight ends up on the ground with somebody on top of him. I do think that somebody's also in for a rude awakening if they let this guy Robelis on top of them, because he could probably do vicious damage with the ground and pound from top position, and he could probably establish a pretty dominant position. He is athletic. He could probably pass to the mount or something like that, open up with ground and pound. So I think both of these guys have a path reasonably to a submission in this fight, just because the other is so unlikely to have good quality submission defense should the fight get into the ground. Whenever you've got a 260 plus pound individual on top of you, you're going to make very hasty decisions about your health and safety and about whether or not you want to continue fighting off chokes and things like that, whether you want to continue your endeavor when somebody is really, good at distributing weight on top of you and making you suffer. And I think that Waldo, he's clearly a boxer, right? He's not going out there to wrestle and grapple these guys at the UFC level, not at all. But against Robelis Despaigne, a guy who's known for his prowess on the feet, wouldn't you think it would behoove you to go out there and try and press some takedowns, some wrestling, some grappling, get on top of the guy, put him on his back, make him uncomfortable? I think it certainly would. And when I'm looking at the other side for Robelis Despaigne, I think that, if he's got some ground game in his back pocket, that would be awesome, but he hasn't had to show it yet. He's just going out there and knocking everybody out. The things that make me really concerned about Robelis is, number one, against Parisian, he throws a kick in the early going and right away, falls to his butt. Now, thankfully, he was able to get back up, backpedal, and land the knockout. If he had lost against Parisian, that would have been pretty laughable. But to just see him, go out there, take that kind of risk, and then lose position, and a better guy could have taken advantage of that, it does make me think that he is an accident waiting to happen in the UFC. Now, I think he should be able to win this fight, but again, it's kind of like with Vitor Petrino and Anthony Smith. Last week, I spent a lot of time talking about how Anthony Smith is better at every skill in MMA, and the problem is, Vitor Petrino sucks, but the fade is just not this fight. Sometimes you just don't want to wait on the fade. And I do think that Robelis Despaigne is fade worthy at some point. I think he is athletic. I think the UFC would like to see him do well. But I also think they have realistic expectations for where he's at. And he hasn't been training MMA for very long. And so, let's say he's put together half decent skills on the ground. Where's his cardio at? I can tell you guys, the one thing that concerned me coming into the Parisian fight is that I have seen this guy Robelis go out there and look to be tiring at the end of his Taekwondo matches in the Olympics. And those are, again, 7.5 minutes, 8 minutes. They're not as long as a UFC fight. And this is clearly a guy who has excellent power. He's got crazy flexibility. It's very rare to see a heavyweight who can kick over their own head. And this guy can kick over his own head. He's huge. He's tall. He's long. He's a freaking beast. So there's a lot that you could say positively about Robelis. However, you just have a lot that still needs to be proven by this guy. 91% of voters on Tapology expect him to get the job done, but he's 35 years of age. He's 6'7", huge, 87-inch reach. I mean, that's absolutely massive. And he's got power in his hands. He's got power in his kicks, but I just don't think he's got a very traditional game. And I think there's a chance he could get wrestled and taken down in this fight. So for me, there's just not a lot, to love for the price tag on a guy like Robelis. But I also think that, he is a freak athlete. We've seen a lot of Cubans age out of the sport later in life than other, people that come into the sport. It's just like guys like Yoel Romero still out there competing, looking sensational at 38, 39 years of age. So I do think Robelis has the athletic pedigree to, show a very good product later on in his UFC career, but he still is out there garnering experience. And he has not shown us that he could fight, even 7.5 minutes at a premium, level. And so for Waldo Cortes-Acosta, he hasn't shown that he's the best UFC fighter we've ever seen, but he has shown he's competent. He has shown he's a worthy, product to be in there. I did make the joke last time he should salsa his ass on the PFL if that's how he's going to fight against Arlovsky. But that's just because we want to see him press his advantages and go out there. And if you got a great jab, throw it more, take the guy out, use your punching combinations to create damage. And he really was point fighting in his last couple of fights. I think in this fight, he's going to understand point fighting with a guy who's trying to take your head off probably doesn't make sense. So I think he's going to try and push him against the fence, take a little piss and vinegar away from this guy, try and take him to the ground. But I really want to see what Waldo is talking about in interviews this week and see if he's got a good game plan. Because if he's talking about, hey, I want to go out there and trade, blows with this guy and see how my striking goes, then I'm probably going to have to pass here because he is the smaller guy and he is, very liable to get knocked out here. But we haven't seen him knocked out, I don't believe, since he was a professional boxer. Just looking at his professional MMA record, he's got one loss via decision, and he did lose a couple of boxing matches, but I think that you can mostly excuse those as him being a little bit overmatched. Shout out to one of the sharpest in the game. Jack Attack MMA says all the best for this weekend, Liam. Cheers to you, my brother. Bless you as well. Shout out to Jeff K. Says, whoa, Liam, this is alive right now. Wild schedule, my man. You know it. There's so much value with Robelis. We're going to appreciate it afterwards. Says Dennis, interesting. Good morning from Catalonia. Ready to roll this weekend. So shout out to all you guys. Thank you. Josh says he's also at a bad camp. Who do you mean, Josh? I'm assuming you mean Robelis, but I'm curious who you're talking about there. In any case, though, guys, we can move along to the next fight where these are the two Twitter talks of the town, right? We've got the heavyweight contest, and then we've got this lightweight bout between Chase the Dream Hooper and his opponent Slava Borschev, Viacheslav, Slava Claus, Borschev. And this is a fight where, Chase Hooper is my kind of fighter. I really like Chase Hooper, and I'll tell you, obviously he's got deficiencies. Obviously there's some things that are going to hold back a guy like Chase Hooper. What are they? Number one, he doesn't have the most developed stand-up game. So he can be hit, he can be hurt, he can be cracked. It can behoove you as a fighter to strike some fear in your opponents, to have people be intimidated by your very presence, right? Alex Pereira, guys are half shitting their pants when they're going to fight Alex Pereira because they know one left hook and this fight could be over, right? That knockout power, that death touch, it inspires fear. People aren't really afraid of Chase Hooper, right? They feel like they could go out there and have a fight with this kid. He seems like a nice guy. Like you kind of know outside the cage, this isn't a rough and tumble individual who's going to beat you up. He's a nice guy and he's out there with a set of skills, and clearly he's got the jiu-jitsu and he's getting better with his wrestling, and he's going out there and showing that at 155 pounds, he could take a shot a little bit better and he could throw a very high volume of strikes and make people uncomfortable. I mentioned the fight with Nick Fiore, where Nick Fiore showed a great chin. Mateusz Rebecki was unable to put him away. Hey, neither was Chase Hooper. Chase Hooper landed a ton of shots. He bloodied his nose. He busted him up. He landed knees to the body. He landed punches upstairs, shots around the guard. He does not have a ton of power in his hands. And that is the difference fundamentally between him and his opponent here, Slava Claus, Slava Borschev. Slava Borschev is a murderous puncher. He is a dangerous guy on the feet. He throws big shots both to the head and to the body. He can throw nice combinations, touch, 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 touch. Excellent combination, rhythm striking. He throws 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, and he'll just start whipping combinations where he's throwing his hands fast. The problem with Slava is he wants to set his feet. He wants to throw hands. He wants to bang. And that kind of style does lend itself to guys being able to take you down. And they start going to grab a hold of you and they start going to rip you to the ground. And Slava oftentimes gets his weight out of balance on his hips. And the other thing that I would mention is he does a good job sometimes of throwing his hips back to prevent the initial takedown. But he does not do a great job of throwing his hips back and stuffing the head. So a lot of times guys are able to get to his back or get to a standing rear waist lock or push him against the fence after he's defended the first takedown because he throws his hips back without locking in a whizzer or stuffing the head or forcing the head to the inside or doing any of the other requisite things you'd want to see to defend the takedown. So for Slava Borschev, he's extremely talented. He's extremely dangerous, and his record is deceptive because you look on paper and you say to yourself, man, this guy's only had 11 professional fights, but he's clearly had a very good kickboxing resume outside the UFC. I think he was like 18-2, they said on broadcast. Don't quote me on that. Don't kill me on that. But I'm pretty sure when I was listening to his fights, I did watch a little bit of Slava tape today. And Slava, he's a guy that he goes out there and he competes hard. He's not an easy guy to put away by any means, but he can get hurt. He can get rocked. He can get wobbled. He can get put away. I do think that that's something that is going to happen to him in his career. He will be put away in devastating fashion. Kenley St. Louis had him in a very dangerous situation. He lost a close decision, and I thought deservedly so, to William Starks, where he was put in some danger in that fight. Mark Diakese, he out-wrestled him from pillar to post, was completely uncompetitive. And if my memory serves, that was at UFC Columbus. Yeah, it was. I was actually there in person. Mark Diakese just beat him pillar to post with no striking, guys. It was all just takedowns, easy wrestling success, dominant wrestling success for Mark Diakese. And that had not been his game prior in the UFC, guys. He was a leg kicker. He was a guy who'd strike from the outside. He had a little bit of grappling, but we had seen that most of what he did was strike. And he went out there and said, I am not striking at all. I am wrestling, grappling, and that's it. And he dominated Viacheslav Borschev. I think he got 10 or 11 takedowns in that fight off the top of my head. Then Mike Davis went out there and got 9 takedowns against Viacheslav Borschev, took him down over and over and over again. And another guy at Mike Davis who's primarily a striker, a guy who primarily wants to go out there and use his hands, use his feet, use his weapons. He realized, hey, this guy Slava is different. You don't want to be on the feet with Slava. You don't want to bang with this guy. Take him down and get it to the mat. Now, what's interesting is most of those guys are better wrestlers than Chase Hooper. I wouldn't deny that, right? Chase Hooper is a grappler. He's a jiu-jitsu guy. And these other guys are a little bit more all-rounders, right? They're primarily strikers, but they've got strength in all positions, and they're physical. They're big lightweights. I think that Chase Hooper is growing into this lightweight division, and he used to cut a lot of weight to 145 pounds, guys. And I think that compromised his chin. I think it compromised his durability. I think it compromised his willingness to go out there and throw a lot and be active. And I think now he's out there throwing more shots. I think he's less afraid to get hit. I do think he's got to be very safe and careful in this fight. But he can also go out there and push and land shots on Slava. I've seen Slava get hit by every opponent he's fought, essentially. He does a pretty good job of avoiding big shots, but when he gets hit cleanly at all, he can rock, wobble, do the dance. Nazim Sadikov got a draw with Slavakos in a fight where he largely lost the minutes because he hit Slava so hard that Slava was dancing all over the place. He hit him with a head kick. I said it already. Slava's one of the toughest bastards you'll ever see, right? He'll take big shots. He'll keep coming forward. He'll keep trying to fight, but you could definitely hurt this guy, rock him, put him down. And then what I've seen from a number of opponents is they do not have the skills on the ground to put him away. So they can hurt him. They can put him in bad spots, but then he can recover and he can keep throwing back. And I just think that when you look at how Chase Hooper fights, he really is a difficult guy to deal with unless you can stuff all the takedowns. So if you can stuff all the takedowns, Chase Hooper becomes a guy with not very good striking, who needs to clinch you, who needs to mix in all his different attacks, and he might try and pull guard, and he might try and grab a hold of the body locks and stuff, but he's not always physical enough to get the wrestling game off. Fair enough. But when you look at what he does well, his top position is fantastic. And what I mean by that is when he's on top of you, he's not just a guy that's going for, falling back for leg locks and going crazy. That's the problem with a lot of jiu-jitsu guys is they don't have damage that they do. They don't create damage. Nick Fiore, his face in round 1 was busted up. he took damage from Chase Hooper from minute 1 till the end, right? And I'm not equating Slava and Fior. I'm just saying that's the difference between Chase Hooper and these guys. Chase Hooper creates damage. When he gets the fight to the ground, he's beating you up with ground and pound, and then he's trying to look for submissions when he can. But he's more than happy, just like Felipe Colares, the late Felipe Colares, God rest his soul. Felipe Colares is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's not the greatest fighter you've ever seen, and he takes a lot of damage in his fights. So Chase Hooper was aware of that, and instead of trying to submit the BJJ black belt all 15 minutes, he landed a lot of strikes on the ground. He created a lot of transitions. He made the other guy exhausted, and he finished him. And when you look at Slava Borschev, a lot of things he does on the ground are explosive. They're desperate. They're a guy who does not want to lose, a guy who really wants to win, a guy who really wants to scramble, who really wants to compete, who really wants to get up, who's got a lot of will to win, got a lot of drive. But he does not have the skills that a guy like Chase Hooper has on the mat. I think that the skills on the ground, if the fight gets there, will look evidently different between these two guys. I think that Chase has better transitions. I think he's a better scrambler. I think he's a more creative grappler. I think he's a more dangerous submission threat. So I think that Chase offers a lot on the ground. And moreover, a lot of these guys have been trying to get on top of Slava, and their passing is shit. No disrespect, but just like the way that they're trying to pass the guard is pretty basic, and it's allowing Slava to tie up their legs to create these butterfly hook scenarios and all these stuff. I don't think any of that shit is working against Chase Hooper if the fight is on the mat. So on the feet, it's a pretty binary fight because Slava's the more dangerous guy. He has a big body to target in Chase Hooper, and he's got great body work. So he's going to try and rip those hooks. He's going to try and land knees. He's going to try and land kicks. He's going to try and land these big punches. But I have a feeling that Chase Hooper is going to sprint at this guy from the opening bell, try and get in his face, try and create tangles, try and create clinch scenarios along the fence line, try and make this guy wrestle, grapple, scramble with him somehow. And I think that the longer they're doing that, there's an expression that we use sometimes in wrestling. Like if you're the better wrestler, then you want to create more wrestling positions in the course of 7 minutes and you'll win the match. Because you're just going to have more answers for wherever the scramble goes. And if you're the worst wrestler, you want to try and limit some of the scrambles. You want to try and limit some of the engagements, and you want to pick your spots very carefully, try and get one perfect attack maybe. Oh, boom, got it. Okay. And now I fend off these attacks, get the win. For me, I could see multiple paths for Chase Hooper. I think he could win this fight in the first round if he gets to a dominant position when they're both dry. I think he could wear down somebody like Slava, beat him up, drag him into deep water, and finish him late on the ground. I think that he could also go out there and win a close decision where he forces Slava into a lot of clinch exchanges, where he maybe puts in a body triangle for one round, where he just forces this guy to grapple more than he's comfortable with and survives the scary exchanges on the feet. But I could also see a world in which, Slava goes out there and cold cocks him. So I understand why people like Slava here. I understand why Slava opened as the favorite. But for me, it's a dog or pass situation because I think it's a pick'em type of fight. I think it's a fairly binary fight. Obviously, the fight starts on the feet, so maybe you want to make Slava minus 115, but I think that the line would flip instantly if Chase Hooper gets one takedown in this fight, not because he could finish it with one takedown, but it would show proof of concept. If this guy can get takedowns, he can create damage, he can create tiring situations, he can create situations where he can win by submission. So for me, Chase Hooper is just a guy that you don't want to count out. You want to count him out at your own peril. When he's been favored heavily in the UFC, he's dropped the ball a couple times. He hasn't always come through. But as a dog, I bet on this guy a number of times, and he's come through for me several times before against the Felipe Colares of the division, against Nick Fiore, I think it was as well. So I like Chase Hooper as a broad prospect, and he's the younger guy with more professional experience. He's the bigger guy. He checks a lot of boxes for me from a long-term standpoint. And so I think Slava could definitely win the fight, but he is a guy that gets a lot of love because he's got knockouts and fun fights, fight of the night type of guy. He's got a lot of heart and a lot of will to win. But I also think he's got clear deficiencies. He had a lot of heart and will to win, and Mark Diakiese took him down 10 times. It's just like when you can get taken down 20 times in 2 UFC fights, you have a clear grappling deficiency. And training a team alpha male was true then, and it's true now. So I don't know what that has to do with anything. And for me, I just think that this is a fight where Chase Hooper has a one-track mind. And unlike a lot of Slava opponents, he knows I need to wrestle, grapple, or I'm going to die. And I think he's going to do it from second one till till he wins or dies. And for me, that makes him a worthy underdog to consider this week. Shout out to everybody who's rocking with us live. I want to say, if you're watching on social media, do me a quick favor, guys. Just drop a like. Go ahead and retweet this. Let other people know that you're watching the show. I really appreciate the support. It means the world to me. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and drop a like on the video. Get subscribed to the channel. Appreciate everybody that's rocking with us live. It is 4:13 local time. So the kid is out here putting in late night hours after jiu-jitsu, after we've already gotten in, that early work. But I'm going to get a nap in before we have bets and banter later and still watch more tapes, still watch more, footage and get that due diligence in and make sure I keep coming with the sharpest takes as well as the sharp, great guests that you guys are expecting for bets and banter. So appreciate all that support. With that housekeeping in order, guys, let's move along to the next fight on the bill. And the next fight that we've got is Terrance McKinney taking on Esteban Ribovics. And my first thought here was, Terrance McKinney plus 160 just seemed a little bit off to me because he's a more experienced UFC guy and he's extremely dangerous in the first round. And when somebody is likely to win the first round, they're oftentimes going to have to be priced as the pre-fight favorite. The reason being is if they're the pre-fight underdog, you can get them at plus money. Then when they're dominating early in the round, you could bet the other fighter at plus money when the line inevitably flips, and you have a risk-free scenario as the bettor. That's something that the house wants to try and avoid, right? So they normally have the guy who's going to win the first round favored in most of these fights. Not all of these fights, but most of these fights. And when you're looking, I do think that there is a chance, that Terrance McKinney comes out here and wins the first round at a decent clip. The reason being, Ribovics can start a little bit slow sometimes in his fights. And we've also seen that he can be taken down. He can be exploited a bit on the mat. He's very reliant on his Kimura series off of his back to defend. And I don't think that we're likely to see at Kimura while McKinney is fresh, right? Later on in the fight, if he exhausts himself, if he gets in bad positions, maybe then. But early on in the fight, I don't expect that to work for Ribovics in terms of his defense. So for me, there is some equity in McKinney coming out here, winning this fight in the first round, whether that's via TKO, whether that's via submission. He is a guy that is live in the first round. He can get a body triangle. He's got some length. He's got some ability. He's got some dynamic wrestling. He's also a guy that can be very fast to connect with his strikes. Knocked out Mafrovola with one of his first strikes of the fight, left hand, I believe. Very clean, very fast. So McKinney can be extremely dangerous, and Ribovics has never been finished in the first round, but that doesn't mean it's impossible to do it, right? We always have to take into account anything is possible in fighting. It's a crazy dynamic art. And then on top of that, Terrance McKinney is a proven first round finisher, a guy who's got the ability to go out there and take somebody out. Even Sean Woodson, another guy's fighting on this card, got dominated in round one against Terrance McKinney to the tune of a potential 10-8. Then he was able to finish him in round two. So I understand the people that are taking shots on late round props for Ribovics. I've definitely thought about doing the same in this spot. I've thought about taking McKinney on the money line, like I told you guys, for the same arbitrage type strategy. If he can get a takedown in the first 2 minutes, you could probably have a risk-free money line wager on both sides at plus money. So these are a couple of things I've thought about. But now as the line is contracted, let's go over and look at fight numbers. I know plus 138 was a number I saw before as the best available on Terrance McKinney. I'm now seeing plus 145. Best available on Circus Sportsbook for Terrance McKinney. I'm seeing Esteban Ribovics minus 155 over at Caesars Sportsbook, the best available price on the favorite. So you've got both guys in this spot that are, quality. But Terrance McKinney obviously has more proven flaws. He's a little bit more of a known commodity. And the Ribovics side, you're kind of playing into his potential, right? He's just 12-1. He has looked fairly average in the UFC, but losing to Loic Radzhabov, Loic looks like a guy who may be abusing those, supplements, and a guy who might have been taking advantage of the post-USADA era. Beat Kamwela Kirk in an absolute dogfight as well. So we've seen Ribovics is willing to go to that deep scary place and kind of push himself to a really hard degree. And I just don't know that we've seen that from McKinney. So if you're looking for a dog to back in a dog fight, I'm looking probably at the Ribovics side, but he is the chalk favorite, unfortunately. So not breaking any news there. I think ABC say always bet on cardio, but got to just shout out the fact that Terrance McKinney is under 30 years of age. He does look like he's had mental problems in the past, not as much physical problems against Nazim Sadikov. He was looking okay. He got his arm trapped on a rear naked choke attempt. If you guys have ever grappled before, go ahead and try and grapple with somebody. If you ever get your arm caught like that on the rear naked choke, whether it's behind your back, whether it's at your side and they catch it in a body triangle or something like that, it's just a really scary situation and it's tough. Did he quit there? Yes, he did. But was he in a dire situation? Yes, he was. And he's going to be cornered by my guy, friend of the show, Saeed Yakub Kakramanov, I believe. So shout out to Saeed Yakub. Shout out to Terrance. They're going out there looking for a win. They're going out there in blood, trying to put on for the team. But it is a tough spot. And Esteban Ribovics has proven to be a tough guy throughout his career. So let's see if McKinney can be the first guy to finish Esteban Ribovics, or if McKinney can adjust that cardio and show a little bit better preparedness and pacing and, deliver a 15-minute decision for the first time in his career. I'm not holding my breath necessarily. Next up, we've got Tabatha Ricci taking on Tecia Tiny Tornado Torres. And we'll be a little bit quicker about these fights, guys. Big age gap favoring Tabatha Ricci. She's going to be the same size as Tecia Torres in this fight, but she is going to be 5 years younger. Tecia Torres coming back off of pregnancy as well. She gave birth to Raquel Pennington's child. And so now Raquel Pennington's won the title. Obviously, family affair. I think that Tecia Torres is going to come out here ready to compete. I do think that she's doing this because she loves it. I think she's doing this because she likes to fight, to scrap, to get down. And I think Tabatha Ricci has the tools to win this fight, but she's a girl that for me is a little bit hard to trust. Coming off that last performance, she fought another age contemporary in Lupi Godinez, but Lupi has kind of been a bit of a bag fumbler of late in the UFC. If you look at her recent run, lost to Verna Jandiroba, lost to Angela Hill, lost to Luana Carolina, lost to Jessica Panay, all women that you would think Lupi Godinez should be able to beat. So the fact she was able to go out there and eke out the split decision over Tabatha Ricci was a little bit mildly concerning. The fact she lost to Manon Fiorot will totally wipe that one clear off the slate. And the fact that she beat, Jillian Robertson and Jessica Panay, Pollyanna Viana, Maria Oliveira, that shows her grappling translates. She's very talented, 4-2 in the UFC. But Tecia Torres is a woman that's never been submitted in her professional career, 1-0 to the sub, and she lost a split decision to Mackenzie Dern before she left. I think that what was concerning there is her hittability against Dern. I do think that means she's going to be hittable against somebody like, Tabatha Ricci as well. But in that fight, when I look back, I'm trying to pull up the reach on Mackenzie Dern. Mackenzie Dern and Tecia Torres, Mackenzie was actually the bigger fighter, right? So she had a 2-inch reach advantage and she was 3 inches taller than Tecia. Now we're going to see two girls that are very similar in size, and Tecia has 15 fights in the promotion. So coming back off of a pregnancy, I'm not sure how well that bodes for her, but I think that this is probably a Tabatha Ricci decision. I think it's going to be a close fight. I just think she's probably got the takedown upside if somebody's going to get takedowns here. And I think the striking's going to play out close on the feet. But it's not a fight I feel very bullish about. And I'll do a little more research, so I have more to offer on bets and banter. But for me, I like Tabatha Ricci long-term against grapplers. But against strikers, I'm not sure, because I do think that her striking's a little bit suspect. All right, guys, next up, we got Billy Goff against Trey Waters. This is another fight I'm going to be brief on because I don't have the strongest thoughts. You've got huge advantages in terms of height, reach for the Trey Waters side, and that's not being matched by the odds, right? So the odds are quite close here. That tells you stylistically, you got two guys with under 10 professional fights, under 12, I should say, professional fights. Billy Goff has 11. Trey Waters has 9. So Billy Goff has been a prolific comeback guy. Like, he gets dropped in a lot of his fights. He gets hurt, cracked, rocked on the chin, but he's just been very tough. He's been willing to push through damage, get through to good positions, or to land his own shots. Got knockouts, landed big low kicks, trades in the pocket, invites volatility. So for me, he's a guy that can never be like a big favorite, but he can never be a huge dog either, because he's a junkyard dog. He's going to fight very hard for your money, and he does have skills to pay the bills when he gets on top. When he gets to good positions, he can win fights, but he does seem to be like a little bit of a risk taker and a guy that's taken a lot of shots on the chin regionally already on the come up. And if we peek over at the age, he's 25 years of age, so he's still a very young man, taking on 29-year-old Trey Waters here. But Trey Waters, to me, seems like the cleaner guy, seems like a guy who can maybe operate from a little bit of a further distance and dictate where this fight takes place. But if somebody gets in and gets an early finish, I kind of have a feeling it's going to be Goff, just because Goff seems to me like the guy who will get up, keep pushing, keep getting beat up, take the damage from Waters, and Waters will kind of sit back and kind of keep him at the end of his jab, keep him at range, kind of enforce that. But I think Billy Goff is the one who's going to try and push forward, make it a bar fight, and just find a way to win this. So good scrap, close fight. I kind of agree with the odds. Probably make Trey Waters a slight favorite here, and should be a good scrap though. I'd probably lean towards the under. Somebody's probably getting finished in the first 2.5 rounds there. Next up, you've got Jake Hadley against the other hometown guy, Charles Energy Johnson. And so I think that Jake Hadley is a guy that did himself no favors, unfortunately, when he first got to the UFC. And that's led to some matchmaking that has been less than desirable, right? Comes in, beats Mitch Raposo, misses weight. Dana signs him anyway, and the matchmakers feed him to Nascimento. Nascimento, very talented grappler, a guy who's got a lot of skills. And you look at his record, he had a lot of professional experience as well, just lapping the professional experience of a guy like Hadley. Then they give him somebody who's a contemporary, like Carlos Candelario. He's able to submit Candelario. He's able to finish Malcolm Gordon via strikes. So those aren't things that are like blow your hair back impressive, but you say, hey, you know what? He did his job. He did what he was supposed to do. He looked clean doing it in those 2 fights. Then he goes out there against Cody Durden. He had 1 near submission against Durden, and that was a good look. But otherwise, guys, really left a lot to be desired, losing all the rounds across the board, getting tired a little bit down the stretch. Same thing happened against Nascimento. So he could be out-grappled. He could lose rounds. We've seen him lose decisions now regionally on the amateurs as well as in the professional ranks. So I think Charles Energy Johnson is going to present a lot of problems for him because he has a very high pace. He's got a very high work rate. He's 3-4 in the promotion right now with the UFC, but he's fought a high level of competition. He lost to Ode Osborne via very close split decision. He lost to Cody Durden, common opponent, lost to Rafael Esteban, wrestling, grappling, heavy game plan type guys. And then you look at a guy like Muhammad Makayev, also wrestling heavy, but none of these guys have submitted him. Even on the regional scene, Brandon Royval, unable to submit him when they fought. He was able to beat him, but unable to submit him. So you look, and Charles Johnson seems virtually unsubmittable. On the feet, his striking is not the best, but it is coming along. He did knock out Jimmy Flick in the first round. He did beat Zhalga Zhumagulov via split decision. Very close win for him there. Beat Carlos Mota, a guy who is right on the proximity of the UFC via 5th round stoppage in an LFA title fight. Impressive win there. And then he beat Azat Maxim, took that undefeated record 15-0, now make that 15-1, coming off a loss to Charles Johnson. And Charles just looked like the better conditioned athlete out there. So now Charles is coming off of a win. He's got a little bit of momentum behind him. He's fighting in his hometown, and he's taking on a guy in Hadley who does seem like he can get shut down sometimes in the wrestling and grappling. 6-year age gap between these two guys, but the same height and reach essentially. Charles is going to be a little bit bigger, if anything. I think that Charles could maybe get out wrestled and out grappled here, could lose a decision, could get cut up with an elbow because that's the best tools from Hadley. But overall, I feel like Charles Johnson probably more likely to get the crowd on his side, probably more likely to stuff takedowns in 2 and 3, probably going to get off on a little bit more volume while this fight's on the feet. So for me, give me Charles Johnson to pull the upset here. Next up, guys, And I'm not trying to give short shrift to these last couple fights, but I want to make sure that we're well rested and come back for bets and banter with even more good information to give you guys for those fights. So next up, we got Jared Gooden taking on Kevin Jousset. If you're sipping coffee, cheers to you. Have a sip on with me. Bang. Jared Gooden, Kevin Jousset. Holy smokes. Jared Gooden has way more professional fights than this guy, about 30 professional fights on his resume, and he's got a bad record in the UFC, just 2-4. But that last fight against Wellington Terrance showed off the knockout power and the submission abilities in the same fight. I think he was the first guy to ever submit Wellington Terrance, so feather in his cap there. Lost to Carlston Harris, a very dangerous fighter, very difficult guy to beat. And Carlston Harris does have a bunch of wins by decision, but his only win by decision in the UFC was against Jared Gooden. He was unable to put him away. He put away Jeremiah Wells. He put away Impa Kasanganay. He put away Christian Aguilera. So I think that you got to put a little bit of respect on Jared Gooden's name for making it the 15 minutes there as well. He lost to Impa Kasanganay at XMMA, but Impa Kasanganay obviously has been having a lot of success outside the UFC. He lost to Randy Brown in a fight where he also missed weight. And Randy Brown is a quality guy, a guy who's been around the UFC for a very long time, way more proven than a guy like Kevin Jousset, in my humble opinion. Even though Jousset has some ability and he's a young guy on the come up, he hasn't shown the same winning equity in the UFC that a guy like Randy Brown has shown. And that was a fight where Randy was able to land a bunch of effective offense, but Jared Gooden was able to stick with him for the full 15 minutes. Same thing against Abubakar Nurmagomedov. Went 15 minutes there, just got outpointed to the end. Alan Jouban, way outmatched in terms of experience there, lost the fight. But he knocked out Nicholas Stolze in the UFC. He finished Wellington Terrance. So can Jared Gooden get his third UFC finish? I do think it's live against Kevin Jousset. I think that Jousset could win the fight, but what has he really proven to us? He's 12 fights deep in a professional career. He's a city kickboxing guy. His wrestling and grappling has looked okay, but Kiefer Crosby, I thought, was a suspect guy in his own right, and he did land some huge damaging shots in that fight. There's damage both ways there, and he's lost split decisions on Eternal MMA regionally, lost to Jack Della Maddalena regionally as well. So you don't hold those too much against him, but then the fact that he went with Kenan Song and Kenan Song landed some decent shots in that fight as well. I think that Jared the Night Train Gooden is somebody that could win a fight, surprise people, land a knockout blow. So for me, probably a dog or pass situation. I think Jousset still has a lot to prove in terms of his UFC potential. And last but not least, guys, shout out to Weston Dubs in the chat with the kind words. He says, love you, Liam. Love you too, Weston. Appreciate the support, my brother. Appreciate you being here, especially for the late night. This is for the night owls. This is for the people that drink coffee past midnight, or the people that are waking up and now seeing that I'm live and saying, hey, let's check in and see how the show's going. I appreciate you guys either way. So thank you guys all so much. But here we go. JJ Aldridge, Veronica Hardy, last but not least. I think Veronica Hardy's going to win this fight. Now, let me make my case for why. I think that Veronica Hardy, if you look at her old UFC footage, you will be led astray. When she fought Bea Malecki, when she was very low level in terms of her process. Let's go back and pull up her record as well. She's 8-4-1 as a professional, and in the UFC, she's 3-4, guys. So all four of her losses in the UFC: lost to Ashley Evans Smith, lost to Andrea Lee, lost to Jillian Robertson. What is so interesting about that? What is so interesting about that, guys? She lost to those women, and those women were bigger. They were stronger. They looked physically imposing compared to her. No lie, she had a little bit of a belly. She just looked to be a little soft. And now her body type has changed completely. She's working with Dan Hardy, who's her husband. She's gotten into the Renzo Gracie system, and her armbar against Polyana Viana was a little bit of proof of concept. But since then, since she returned as the, wife of Dan Hardy, or the partner, or whatever you want to call it, Juliana Miller, jiu-jitsu girl, she out-grappled her, beat her up, won the fight via unanimous decision. Jamie Lynn Horth, guys, is a woman I really respect. She's tough. She can grapple. She can wrestle. She can fight. She can strike. She's like a gamer. and she was able to get the win via split decision over Jamie Lynn Horth. That told me, man, this girl Hardy is not the same girl she used to be on tape. Throw that out, because that girl on tape, if you lose to Bam Malecki, you're losing to Jamie Lynn Horth. I'm telling you. This is a wake-up call, I felt. Now, on the other side, J.J. Aldrich, let's give the devil her due, right? J.J. Aldrich is a fine fighter, 13-6 as a professional, 9-5 in the UFC, a long track record. Nothing to take away from that. But she beat Na Liang, a girl who's cut from the promotion now. She beat Montana De La Rosa, a girl that's very hit and miss and just did not attempt to wrestle or grapple in that fight, which is her path to victory in most of her fights. She loses to Ariane Lipski. Lipski is on her resurgence, so we'll give her a pass. She loses to Erin Blanchfield via a standing guillotine choke. She was looking good early and kind of blew it late. Same thing happened against Macy Barber. Looking good in round 1. By round 2, the pressure gets to her and she gives up. I think she is a mentally fragile person inside the cage. No disrespect, but just that's what we've seen when she faces a lot of pressure. Round 2 against Tatiana Suarez. Close round 1. Round 2, she gets submitted. Round 1 against Jamie Moyle, she gets submitted. So it's just been a problem throughout her career as a professional. She gets submitted when things go tough in round 2, in late round 1. She just ends up giving up bad positions, and that's what we've seen. So her best wins are Pollyanna Viana, Danielle Taylor, Courtney Casey, Vanessa Demopoulos, Julian Robertson, Montana De La Rosa. These are all bottom of the division girls, and these are the same kind of girls that Veronica Hardy's been beating. So while she doesn't have the same amount of experience, I think Veronica Hardy has too much skill, too much investment in her career, too much strength and physicality at this point. I think she's going to find a way to beat up, hurt, and eventually finish JJ Aldrich. So give me Veronica Hardy in the first fight of the night. That's my pick. And that is the end of the show. Thank you guys all so much. God bless you all. I really appreciate you all. I still have a lot of work left to do by the time I speak to you guys for Bets and Banter. So again, if you're new here, make sure you get subscribed to the channel. We talk MMA here each and every week on the show, trying to put you guys in a position to succeed on these UFC bets. I've been profitable the last 4 years betting on the UFC, but each card begins anew. The bookies never pay you for the work that you did last week, so it's always right back to work for me. I got a lot of work still to do for this card, but I'm excited about it. I'm glad that we've got a bunch of fights to break down. I'm glad we got a great guest to break it all down with at Bets and Banter later today, so stay tuned for that. Make sure that if you want to support me, there's a bunch of easy ways to do it, guys. Number 1, drop a like on the channel, on the video. That's the easiest way. Get subscribed to the channel. That's an easy way to support. If you want to make sure you never miss a live show, hit the notification bell. That's a super easy way to make sure you're always here live, rocking with us, sharpest chat in the game. That's how you stay active in the sharpest chat in the game. You click that notification bell. You never know when it's going to be 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon that we're going live on this channel. The next thing I'll say, guys, Patreon. If you want to support me, if you want to get in on the bets as I make them, if you want to get in on the resources, the documents that I make, the tape study notes on fighters, on Patreon, $15 a month. Liam Picks Fights, patreon.com/Liam Picks Fights. It's all linked down in the description box below. And I put a lot of work into it, a lot of time, effort, and energy. I've had all these files on fighters. Some of them go back years. I have Kenley St. Louis tape from before this guy Slavo even got into the UFC, right? I bet him at plus 120 against Chris Duncan on the Contender Series. So I just wanted to shout out some of those things. Also wanted to just give a huge shout out to Fight Numbers. When you hear me talk about odds on this show, I'm talking about their UFC odds screen. I'm going to pull it up right now on a share. So I just want to give you guys some perspective about what I'm talking about. So right now, I hope you guys can all see this pretty clearly, but for each of these fights, it has all the different sports books, Bet Online, DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM. And I always tell people, you want to have as many different accounts as you possibly can. And so when I'm looking, before I place a bet, I'm always looking to know, am I getting the best of the number? What are the sharp books that I really respect doing with this number, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, Fight Numbers has been a huge game changer in terms of getting those live, up-to-date numbers on fight day. It's huge. And then that's just the scratching of the surface, right? if you're a DraftKings player, if you're a fantasy player, a lot more resources and tools, industry leading. So really appreciate the support from those guys. John Kelly running a great outfit. So if you're looking for more information, it's in the description box down below. I'm going to put this show out on podcast. I'm going to get the show timestamp for you guys. And I'm going to be back for Bets and Banter at 3:05, live to thrive with our guy, Rich. Just win, baby. So without further ado, if you guys have more questions, comments, concerns, fire those off in the chat, or excuse me, in the comment section down below. And if you have more thoughts that you want to get off your chest, we'll see you in the chat, 3 p.m. Eastern, live to thrive. So God bless you all. Thanks so much. Come back later and we're having all the same fun again. Thanks, everybody.